Hello and welcome to Her Matters. I am your host. My name is Chioma Omero.
Culture of silence. Again, silence, because if you even try to say, oh, he did this to me, she did this to me, people then say, where's your proof? Are you sure?
Now, what I've seen is parents are not talking to their daughters and their sons. They are not talking to them. So when
people now think that if someone in the medical profession or in healthcare or in that field carries out the process, it would be safer.
The other part of it is the way we structured our healthcare system to actually selectively, remove these pager medicine vendors out of the entire health loop. We don't officially recognize them, but there's a significant role they have to play.
Hello and welcome to Her Matters. I am your host. My name is Chioma Omero. Her Matters is a talk show series that focuses on pressing issues affecting women across the world. Without a doubt, the health and welfare of citizens contribute immensely to the stability of any nation. Healthy people mean healthy workers. Healthy workers translate to, for the most part, sustained productivity. Family planning and national development is our topic for today, and we have two guests on the show joining us to tackle these issues. So we have with us the CEO of TOS TV Network and a philanthropist and former talk show host who left that, right? Ladies and gentlemen, Osasu Igbinedion Ogwuche. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. It's truly my pleasure.
Thank you for being here. So now, of course, like I said you were one of us, as in you had a talk show, and then you left that after how many? A very
7
long
years.
run.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. So now you are dealing in building your network, from what we know. So please tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to this place.
Okay, I moved back to Nigeria in 2014 after obtaining my high school diploma, my undergraduate, and my master's degree in America. So I moved back, and at the time I was doing television advertising, and it was at the heat of the political campaign. So I was making a lot of money from that because I also went to New York Film Academy and did a short course in TV and film production after interning in Beverly Hills, California for MGM Studios. So I came back, I was doing television advertising, and I was doing a lot of philanthropy work because that's what I feel like I've been intrinsically called by God to do. So I was taking money from the advertising campaigns and giving back, and one day it struck me, I can actually be the bridge between the divide of those who I'm helping get elected into power and those who I'm doing philanthropy work for. So that's how the Osasu show came about. So I said the purpose of this show would be to bridge the communication gap between the electorate and the elected. So taking words directly from the mouths of everyday Nigerians to the ears of their leaders and vice versa to ensure that policies and laws that are made are felt by the poorest of the poor in our society. So I did that for 7 years, from March 2015 to March 2020. And at the 70th anniversary, I was like, okay, this is my number for completion, and it's time to hang up my hat. So it was an amazing time during that. The lives that we impacted, the policies that we were able to implement to get drafted were truly phenomenal. And a spin-off of the Osasu show was the Osasu Show Symposium, which happened also for 5 years, and we're actually thinking of still keeping that going. We talked to presidents of different countries, we talked to presidents of Afrexim Bank, people in the private sector, just to see ways that we can collaborate to make Africa a truly unique and strong, formidable force that can take on any challenge along the way. So after I finished the show, I decided to start my television network, which I actually pre-launched in 2017.
Yeah.
And this network looks to return the power back to Africans, give us the power to tell our own story. It's enough with giving the BBCs and the CNNs and the Al Jazeera's the voice of Africa. No one tells your story like you will. A famous saying goes that the story will forever glorify the hunter as long as the hunted doesn't have its voice. And I think it's time that Africa starts to tell unique, positive stories about us, because we are such a diverse innovative lot of people, and we have the power to do anything. But I believe for so long, the wrong stories have been told about us. So we've only been seen in one way, in one perspective, as poor, dejected, corrupt, and, unable to do anything. So that's what TOS aims to do. Through documentary filmmaking, we tell the African story about innovation. We tell the African story about, getting ourselves together to build something truly formidable moving forward.
So we've been talking about family planning because I know that you have a lot to do with national development and just, making sure that people, I guess for a better phrase, living their best lives, right?
Yes.
And we're talking about family planning. For a couple of episodes, we've mentioned it and harped on it because it's one of those things that is sort of like a dicey subject because you're between culture and people and just the way we are, and having a lot of children is a thing and it's a gift and all these things. So we're in a country of how many million people, 200 and something million people. Like it seems that there's still a lot of ignorance about the fact that you as a parent can decide, or as a mother can decide, as a parent, because it should be a two-way street. So a mother and father can decide how many children they want to have, when to have these children. There is such a high level of ignorance. And what do you think some factors that might be contributing to that?
I completely agree with you. There is a very high level of ignorance when it comes to family planning and child spacing opportunities. A lot of people believe, I remember, as I said earlier, I went to the IDP camp when I just moved back, and I was doing a lot of work with the internally displaced persons, and you had people who were in the camp for 5+ years who were displaced from their communities, and they've had at least 5 children while being in the IDP camp. So I would ask them, I said, why are you having more children when you can't even fend for yourself and the children you already have? And they would say, it's God that gives children. So that level of ignorance is what we deal with in our society. So they believe that it's up to God to give them children. So if they have 10, if they have 20, if they have 30, it's because God loves them. So they are not aware, they are not sensitized to the fact that it's your duty to space your children. You give birth to as many children as you can take care of. So I think a lot of sensitization needs to be done. But I think another reason that people hold back from having a family planning conversation is because people make it very clear-throat. So you are either for or against. So the people who are arguing for argue that family planning is an asset. Population growth is an asset. And people who argue against say that population and family planning and child spacing is a liability. So they reference countries like China, they reference countries like the United States, and they say, well, look, their population works for them, it works for their own good, right? And these are systems that have put in place social security safety nets that can take care of the population that they have. Then you also look at the flip side of that, and China also, who had the one-child policy until recently, where they were saying that they want to have, you can have 2 children, and these people have been able to create social safety nets where they can plan for the population growth that they have. But you have places like Nigeria where there is no planning whatsoever until recently. We don't have social security safety nets, we don't have the right healthcare systems, we don't even have the right education system. For goodness sake, ASU has been on strike now for over 7 months, and this is because the poorest of the poor, the people who can afford
private universities
are sending their children to schools like that as a highly subsidized rate by the federal government. But if you look elsewhere, the governments of these developed countries are able to put together social safety nets to enable, citizens go to community college if you can afford, private universities and what have you. So I believe that family planning is very necessary, but it needs to be a conversation where it's not just, okay, is this an asset or a liability? It has to be more of, okay, what works for you? What are the amount of children that you can take care of and you can provide for? Then the government needs to start putting together policies that will help aid, its growing population.
So when I talked about you had visited IDP camps when you first moved back, and how you noticed people were in IDP camps but still having children. Now, I know that the government is responsible for these citizens in these IDP camps. So somehow I feel like the government should also sort of take the responsibility of making sure that these people are not just having children who are now becoming IDP camp residents because they're born in the IDP camps. What is your take on that? And do you think the government should be should maybe give a little bit more of a push with regarding family planning even in those IDP camps?
I think on this note, the government is actually doing a good job because they partner with a lot of international NGOs to spread the message, to ensure that the IDPs themselves are oriented, that they actually speak to them about, okay, this, you can see that we already have little for you to survive in this camp. And giving birth to more children doesn't make any sense. Exactly. So I know the government has actually been doing a lot in that regard. There was an outreach I attended, and they were sharing condoms to the men in the internally displaced persons camp, which is a means of contraception. Exactly. So, and there were people from the NGOs that they partnered with, and they were giving them some family planning and child spacing, education. So I think the government is trying, but they need to take it to the grassroots. They need to make it local. They need to speak their language. They need to talk to their religious leaders, their traditional leaders, to also intervene and speak to them on the different means of communications that they have. The radio, they might not have access to television, most of them still read newspapers. So let them speak to them through those means of communication that they're conversant with, and tell them that, look, it's not a cultural advantage, nor is it an economic advantage to have, as many children as God gives you. It's actually more sensible to space out, the amount of children that you have and bring to the world lives that you can nurture and actually provide for.
You, as Osasu Igbinedion Ogwuche, what is your take on family planning? How do you feel about it? What do you think it should be enforced? Do you think we should be able to tell people when to have children, when not to have children, and how many children to have? What is your take on that?
Personally, I don't think we should go the route of China and tell each Nigerian we're only entitled to.
Yes.
I think we'll even disobey that. If we look at the laws that we have in Nigeria that are not even being implemented, I don't think that would work in a space like Nigeria. But I think, as I said, throughout the entire conversation, more education, more orientation. I think people need to have their minds open to know that it doesn't give you a big boy or big man status to have 50 children and
that you
cannot take care of.
That's the key. That's
exactly.
It's the take care of part that we're worried about, not having the children.
Exactly.
Being able to cater for them.
And even for one woman to give birth to 20 children, that takes
a lot of women.
Wear and tear.
That's a lot of women.
That's a lot of women, It takes a lot of wear and tear to your body.
Yes.
So even if you can afford it and you can raise that amount of children as a woman, you have to also put your health first. It's not just about pleasing your husband and, doing what makes him seem more of a man, to society. Are you safe? Are you healthy enough to be able to go through that process, that journey 20 times? So I think these are the questions that we need to start asking. As I said earlier, we need to get key voices, key stakeholders involved in this conversation. A lot of religious leaders shy away from this because once you hear family planning, you start to think of contraceptives, birth controls, this and that, and people having sex before they're meant to. But how about we start with conversations like women are dying through illegal abortions because of lack of family planning. Children are being born without adequate healthcare systems and adequate, financial provision for them to live a worthy life because of family planning. So why don't we start from that and take the incremental steps to put solutions in place to be able to curtail this menace?
So now, as we know, the success and failure of any state lies in its ability or inability to manage resources. Now, we talk about like healthcare, for example. For the people of Nigeria, let's come home. I've read that stats are about 43% of Nigerians, only 43% of Nigerians have access to adequate healthcare. Why do you think that is?
I'm surprised that actually up to 43% of Nigerians have access to healthcare, because I remember in 2016, during my conversation with the then Minister of Health, Professor Isaac Adewale, he had promised to build at least one primary healthcare center per ward by the end of the Buhari-led administration. Obviously, that is not the reality on ground today.
We're not going to talk about that.
So you wonder, like, is 43% really reflective of the, actuality on ground? Is traditional medicine also calculated within that 43%? Because you look at domestic staff, are they actually accessing quality advanced healthcare like we are, or are they going to buy different concoctions on the street that they don't even know what's in it? So I think that 43% is very abysmal. I believe that the government needs to do more. I believe that more funds need to be allocated towards healthcare and release, because it's another thing to budget it and it's another thing to release those funds at the end of the day. So I believe that the government must do more, but we as citizens also have a very critical role to play. I love the fact that you asked earlier on about the orientation of the people, and I believe it starts there. Your mindset shapes who you are. It truly makes all the difference. So if we can get to the mind of the people and teach them that these are your fundamental human rights, the ability to choose. God is not going to come from heaven and tell you, don't stop having children.
Yes.
No, it's up to you.
He gave you a brain, he gave you the power of choice and thoughts.
Exactly. And family planning and child spacing is not even about stop having children. It's about, okay, how many children can you take care of? How many children can you send to school? How many children can you feed and clothe? How many children can you give access to quality healthcare at the end of the day? And these are the amount of children that maybe you should have. And for your own health as well as a mother, because we know giving birth in Nigeria, I believe as of 2017, about 295,000 women died from childbirth. This is crazy, yes. And these are due to simple issues like maybe malaria, high blood pressure, blood clotting, issues that are easily, resolvable. So I believe a lot of women need to take their health first and, start to think about more ways to, be health conscious before they make the decision to have.
We discovered that Nigeria's annual budgetary allocation for healthcare stands at about 3%. And an ICIR report states that for the past 11 years, Nigeria has spent 72% of its health sector budget to pay salaries and to run offices. So that's like less than 3% left for everything else. Osasu, when you see these things and you're wondering which way, you ask yourself which way, right? What do you have to say?
So this is not shocking at all because I work closely with these people. So just to put into perspective what you just said, the health allocation in the national budget is 3%. So let's say they get 300,000. They spend 72, as you said, or 70+% of that 300,000 on paying salaries, recurrent expenditure. So give me an idea.
Managing offices.
Yes,
so
managing offices. Yeah.
Furniture, cleaning, trimming the hedges, because money goes into trimming hedges these days.
Don't forget the money that the snakes and the monkeys are going to eat.
Animal eating. Okay,
exactly, those two. So you're spending over 250,000 on doing that. Then you're talking about actually going ahead to use 50,000 to implement what projects, to build what quality hospitals, to buy what quality equipment. Do you understand? To buy what medication that would actually reach those people who cannot even afford it. So it's like, it doesn't make any sense. So that's where the problem comes from. So we're still paying trillions of naira for oil subsidy in Nigeria. So we subsidize oil that we're using to move from point A to point B, but we haven't even thought about subsidizing
life. How about life?
Thank you.
How about
Thank
life?
you, my sister.
We haven't thought about how life moves from being born to being a productive member of society. It's almost like our concerns are misplaced. Where we should be focused, we're not being focused. And it's like and everybody just,
exactly. They're giving up.
We pray it'll get better. God is with us.
It's so unfortunate, and it really breaks my heart because you see women who are yearning for 1,000 naira for prenatal, antenatal care medication, and they don't have it. They put their lives at risk, they put the lives of their children at risk because they cannot afford that.
So we have spoken about social security in developed countries like the US and everywhere else. Now, do you think that that could work here? One, and I know that there might be a pushback from people. Why would they push back from people? Why would you think there would be a pushback? And how do you think, if it can be implemented in this space, how we can do that?
I think every country, every government, every state is responsible for the lives and well-being of their citizens. Social security is not, it's not a privilege. It should be the right of every individual.
It must have.
So as soon as you're born into the state, as soon as you're born into Nigeria, you should have access to basic health care. That should be your fundamental human right. So I believe it should be implemented in its true sense, because if you speak to government officials today, they'll tell you, oh yes, we have social security. You know, you go to government hospitals, you know, it's always subsidized, you don't pay as much. But we know that still, the poorest of the poor, the masses still can't afford it. And most of the hospitals today, we're suffering brain drain. A lot of our doctors are jackpot.
Yes.
They're leaving because they work in such a porous environment that doesn't appreciate them. They are overworked and underpaid. And you can't blame them. When you go to public hospitals these days, you get treated so badly. And you say, oh, it's just Nigeria, they don't know what they're doing. We have some of the brightest minds in Nigeria. How come Nigerian doctors are going out and they're flourishing, but when they're put in a state like this, they keep on acting, you know, in an unprofessional manner? It's the way we keep on treating them. So I believe that social security can work, but the government must be serious. Go beyond paying lip service to it. Actually go ahead and implement it. Take the lives of your citizen as priority. Because you don't need public services such as the public healthcare centers doesn't mean that your driver doesn't need it. Doesn't mean that your maid doesn't need it. And their lives are just as important as yours. So social
and you need it, because look at when we had the lockdown.
Yes,
people couldn't travel for healthcare.
Yes.
You were stuck here.
Yes.
So if our hospitals were working like they were, we probably wouldn't have had as many deaths as we did.
Exactly.
Even though, yes, I like to say God's so kind, it wasn't as bad as everywhere else in the world, but people were still here.
Exactly.
And could not travel.
Exactly.
No matter how many billions they had and millions they had, they couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah. And you're just as good as your surroundings. So if you believe that, okay, I don't need to invest in the public hospitals, but you know the private hospitals will take care of me. Don't forget, God rest his soul, the former chief of staff, the most powerful man in the country from 2015 to 2019, Abakari, died in a private hospital here in Lagos during the COVID lockdown. If there wasn't a pandemic, he could have flown abroad, gotten treated and all of that. But at the end of the day, even the private hospitals are still struggling. You are only a summation of your environment. A private hospital in Nigeria will never, ever be as good as a private hospital in a country that is thriving and taking into cognizance every single day the life, the well-being of its citizens. So you must always strive to do better. Because I love what you said. You never know tomorrow. You never know what can happen. You know, and you'll be stuck in the mess that you have made, thinking that you, your family, were not going to be beneficiaries of it.
Stuck in the mess that you have made. Sadly, in the mess that you have made, innocent people are also stuck in that mess with you. Yes. And they don't have options. You might have options, but you're still making messes that is putting other people in very bad situations that they cannot get out of. Thank you so much, Osasu. I've learned so much on this episode. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out. We appreciate you greatly. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.